What's going on? Slip is here bringing you some more League play with Esper Brain Control. We're on the play here. We see this hand. If Spell Snare is good, this hand is actually not too bad. We have Path for early interaction if it's, Death Shadow John, something like that. In a pinch, if creatures are good on our opponent's side, we can turn 4 Sroms into Path to actually do something on the board. I decided I'm going to keep this. Opponent's on Bant Eldrazi here. Picked up an Eldrazi Temple from that Ancient Stirrings, I believe. Here we might as well just play the fetch. So we can't get Thought Not Seared. We can decide whether we want to path a Sky Spawner or a Displacer, but nothing happens. So we assume our opponent's on a fatter creature hand, and we're banking on that Ancient Stirrings to ramp them. So we're looking at a Seer here probably, and we might as well play Brain in a Jar. We don't need to hold up double Path or Spell Snare at all. And our opponent does indeed play Thought Not Seer. So here, this is kind of an interesting situation. It's nice that we have 2 paths because we don't have to path this in response to it's entering the battlefield. He's pretty clearly going to take 1 path since we already have an enabler on the board here. So we're just going to let him do that. And now the question is, do we want to path it now or do we want to tick up Jar? So what are the benefits of each, right? Path being a 1-mana spell, if we path this and off of it draw, say, Logic Knot, then we can still cast it, right, next turn. If we path it and draw Beck Call, we're going to be able to do it instant speed. I don't see any particular reason to ramp our opponent at the moment. Drawing Peer Through Depths is even better, right? So what we want to do now is wait for our opponent to do something, see what he does, and peer for Beck. If he casts a creature, say he casts a Reality Smasher as a haste creature or something like that, we can peer for Logic Knot. And if the Thought Not Seer swings before he casts some other creature, say he plays Temple Drowner of Hope, then we decide whether we want to path it with no information, or hold up the ability to peer for Logic Knot, right? As it stands, he just taps out for Reality Smasher, so that happens. Here we want to peer, and I want to leave up double blue in case we hit Logic Knot. And here's our peer. So worth noting that because we left up double blue, we can't say block with well, I guess we couldn't block with a token anyway, right? We can't cast this and push, right? But push would be dead otherwise. We don't have a fetch out. And obviously we're just going to take Beck here. So because we have to reveal off of Peer Through Depths, there's no reason to try to trick him into attacking with Thought Not Seer, so we can quadruple block it and path the Smasher. We might as well do this in response, and we draw an extra card. We draw Logic Knot, which we can no longer cast, but doesn't seem to really matter. Get another Peer, which is fine. And if our opponent swings with Thought Not Seer, we're going to quadruple block, but he doesn't. And we have a Spell Snare to discard for free, and we just drew so many cards that the downside off of Reality Smasher is kind of laughable at this point. So here, I like not attacking. We don't need to try to race him at these particular life totals, right? Trading 4 for 4 and maybe snap pathing this. I mean, we could snap path this and Logic Knot whatever he does and start attacking now. I don't mind, but that uses up all of our mana. So we can also just Logic Knot, hold up Logic Knot for whatever he does, threaten to quadruple block, tick up Jar, and then Sroms at instant speed pretty soon. This will let us peer also, develop our hand a little bit. So he plays Drowner, presumably to try to start messing up our ability to block this Thought Not Seer, right? So he taps 1, and then we have to chump unless we want to take 4. But this is a free Logic Knot for us. He decides not to attack with Seer. And we're just going to tick up Jar and then Peer. I guess we shouldn't do it in that order, however, right? So this is a mistake because if the best thing that we can get off of Peer is, say, an Esper Charm, now we can't Esper Charm anymore. So this was pretty dumb. that I did that. There's just no reason for that sequencing. It's super loose. Doesn't end up mattering. And here, I think we're about to draw so many cards, just so many cards, and we can just take Verdict. That's fine. We now have a panic button, instant speed, 1 mana Verdict, a good card. And I'm just going to swing in with these birds. So if our opponent casts something, say taps out for another Reality Smasher or Drowner, what we're going to do is Sroms and Beck off of Jar, then Snapcaster Logic Knot. That way we draw 5 cards and get 9 power on the board. That's kind of nutty. Opponent swings in. Rather than Snapcaster path this, I just want to see what we get. We can think about Snap pathing it also if we don't draw a counter, but our opponent just scoops. That makes sense. Game 2, we are on the draw, of course. And we see this hand, which has Ruined Halo and Verdict. These are strong cards. We can cast Logic Knot off of it. So that's like kind of a thing. I decide, our opponent mulliganed, I decide I kind of want to keep this, even though it's a little dicey with respect to Ruined Halo. If we can dodge Cavern of Souls, or if our opponent plays it early in a way that lets us Ghost Quarter and still Logic Knot something relevant, that's good. If we can Ruined Halo on turn 2 somehow, then we're going to be in pretty good shape probably. Unfortunately, we draw our second Ghost Quarter. Land's looking a little awkward here. Opponent plays Ancient Stirrings, so we're pretty much off the hook for this turn. We draw Supreme Verdict. So if he doesn't play Cavern, we can still Logic Knot something, but plays Cavern and Sky Spawner. So this is a little awkward. Removal isn't going to be the best here, and our opponent is ramping a little bit. Oh, I just hit fast forward a little, but we didn't draw a land. So here we can Ghost Quarter Cavern, and this is a little awkward because we want to get to 4 mana, and the Ghost Quarters also could theoretically, like if we Ghost Quarter to Ghost Quarter, we could get a Plains for these, but I think we don't want to do that. I would rather Ghost Quarter the Cavern right now and keep his board limited to this state. We only need to draw 1 more land for Verdict. I think that's okay. Depending on what he plays, we're going to counter it. Noble Hierarch, we are not going to counter. Nothing else. Oh, incidentally, I didn't mention sideboarding. I apologize. I forgot again. So I don't particularly like running 3 push in this matchup like we could, but I kind of would rather have the 2 Ruined Halos and the Blessed Alliance and the Supreme Verdict as like upgrade removal. And I decided, so for those, like, we take out these cards because they're garbage, and Brain in a Jar because we're bringing in a Sroms too. So we could leave in a push over the Sroms, but I kind of like the Sroms a little bit. I think that's a nice look. We play Ghost Quarter. Not really doing much here. There are fewer and fewer things we're going to be able to counter, actually. But we're still holding on to these Verdicts, and that's pretty good for us. So we want to hope our opponent has a kind of like, you know, light go wide hand, like, say, Displacer, or a heavy go wide hand, like Drowner of Hope. So we're going to go ahead and peer here, because why not? Path, if our opponent tries to get an Exalted trigger off of something, that's fine. We don't want Cryptic in this particular situation. Path seems better. We draw Brain in a Jar, so I decide it's time to cast that. And maybe our opponent has like a Nature's Claim, maybe they don't, but we can still path something. So Reality Smasher isn't disastrous, but the payoff is huge. Okay. It's worth noting that we're going to have a tough time Logic Knotting like a Disdainful Stroke or something here. Opponent plays Eldrazi Displacer, so kind of what we were looking for with this particular hand that we have. And we have to decide whether or not we want to path the Displacer. So I decide it's not worth banking on our opponent drawing, or on our drawing a white source. That would be great, but I think we can just path at this point. And this is also going to motivate him to tap out to activate the Scion, which removes more like blue sources basically. So he's going to have 1 blue source up. That means we only have to counter 1 thing. Means we're very, very likely to be able to bet call. Opponent has all the mana in the world. But if we can start getting these Ruined Halos down, we probably win. I'm going to Beck now in case we draw a white source. And our opponent does not have a counter. We do draw a white source, and now we have to think, like, would we rather Ruined Halo, Thought-Knot Seer, or Reality Smasher at this point? I believe the pretty clear decision is Reality Smasher, unless our opponent plays exactly 2 Thought-Knot Seers to take both of these verdicts. We're in pretty good shape, and even if he does that, we can Ruined Halo them next turn and only have to block the crap that's on board right now. So I'm just going to block. We're at 6. I'm just going to single block that. Opponent plays a Seer. Probably not going to be super happy about what he sees. Takes a Verdict. And we draw a Path. So we can Ruined Halo Seer. We could Path Seer and then Ruined Halo Seer, because if you Ruined Halo Seer, you don't draw a card. I decide I just kind of want a Verdict, maybe. Ruined Halo here, and name Seer. This way, it's not like a relevant board. Like it doesn't have any relevant board presence. It also can't, do anything else. And we want to take up this Jar also this turn. So like tapping out would make it a little awkward. We couldn't Logic Knot with the Ghost Quarter. Blah blah blah. We'll just leave up blockers. Displacer is totally fine. We can't really die from the flicker stuff here. We're just going to single block. We're going to tick up Jar and Telling Time if our opponent doesn't do anything else. And then here we probably just want to wait till our opponent's turn and Supreme Verdict. Oh, I didn't Telling Time there. I actually should have. I don't see why I wouldn't, honestly. Here our opponent starts to Eldrazi Displace or something, which I find a little strange. First of all, well, I guess he can do it twice. But the only thing he can really be targeting on our draw step is Thought-Knot Seer. So our opponent might be a little confused about how Ruined Halo works. So that does nothing. And here we might as well attack for 2. Our opponent now realizes what's going on. He knows about the Verdict. Incidentally, even if that had worked, we could have passed the Eldrazi Displacer in response to his first activation. He basically has to let it resolve, and then we can instant speed Verdict anyway. So we did have an out there. Right. So that's good. We still have Logic Knot up. We also have Path to Exile if it's relevant. Crowner of Hope, I'm going to Logic Knot this. And it gets Disdainful Stroked, which is interesting. And we can either path this or we can just like Telling Time. I decide we don't need to path it right now. I kind of want to know what we're getting into here. There's nothing wrong with these cards. In fact, I don't mind Double Blessed Alliance. I think this will gain us some life. But I choose the path. I think that's okay. I guess my plan is basically we're going to path the Drowner, and then we can push 1 Eldrazi Scion, and given our mana, that's like we can't, double Blessed Alliance or something, right? We want to tap out for 4 for this, probably. So if we push 1, path this lets us Esper Charm our opponent on draw step, and then the following turn we can do a full escalated Blessed Alliance. So Esper Charm our opponent. Path your Drowner. We probably can afford to push a token here, and we take up Jar just in case we draw Beck, but also to get better scry value. I see no reason actually not to take another hit for 1 necessarily, and we see a Beck on top. That's going straight into the hand. Opponent doesn't have any haste cards that aren't dead draws. So we might as well Beck on his upkeep in case he wants to play a creature. And this might prompt a concession, but it doesn't. Yes, it does. So, oh, I think I had actually paused on his draw step there. I was considering Esper Charming him. I think that might be a little loose, but maybe not. We could probably Esper Charm him, but regardless, good game from our opponent, and that's 1-0. Cheers.